This week on the Road to Cinema podcast, actress Kate Flannery of the hit NBC comedy series The Office, where she played Meredith for over 9 seasons, opposite such incredible talent as Steve Carell, Rainn Wilson, John Krasinski, Jenna Fischer, Ed Helms, and many more. We'll discuss the career path that led her to auditioning for The Office back in 2005, the very early stages of her career, where she trained in Second City, and some of the essential lessons from that program that carried over into her later work. We'll delve into the creative process of working on The Office with the talented cast, writers, and directors, and some of her other collaborations outside of The Office, where she's worked with actress Jane Lynch on stage and on a holiday album called A Swingin' Little Christmas, and her long-running stage show with actor Scott Robinson, The Lampshades. For more information on the Road to Cinema podcast, visit jogroadproductions.com. You can subscribe to Road to Cinema on YouTube through the Jog Road Productions YouTube channel, and check out our interviews with Don Cheadle, Ewan McGregor, Greta Gerwig, and many more. You can follow us on Twitter at Jog Road, Instagram Jog Road Productions, like our Facebook page, Jog Road Productions, and don't forget to write us a nice review on the iTunes podcast page under the Road to Cinema podcast. And now we join actress Kate Flannery as we discuss the early part of her career being part of the touring company for Second City. So I just wanted to kind of start off by talking about, I read that you were originally in musical theater and your big transition was joining Second City. So is that accurate?
That's kind of true. Although I will say, in college, I had an epiphany. I was studying musical theater at the school in Virginia, and I felt like nobody had my sense of humor. And I also realized that my type was going away because the 80s was sort of the time of like Andrew Lloyd Webber, and there really wasn't like the second funny lady, the second banana, which had been such a staple in the 50s, 60s, and a little bit in the 70s. So yeah, I transferred schools, and then I kind of used all my skills that I had learned at this conservatory in Virginia, Shenandoah Conservatory, to like make fun of musicals. When I got to Second City, it was like, and then I was at the Annoyance, and that was kind of this thing that we just continued to do. So.
Yeah, so I've read Second City is pretty rigorous in terms of the structure of it. There's certain levels that you're moving up.
It's very political, very hierarchical.
So what was your initial impression jumping in there? Did you feel intimidated at all, or were you kind of ready to...
Absolutely. When I first got hired, I was supposed to go into this one company, and then I got switched to a swing, which meant I had to understudy for a couple different ones. But I was also working at the Annoyance Theater, and we were doing the Real Life Brady Bunch, and I was playing Alice at the time. I was the second Alice in the original cast, but I'd done episodes like pretty much, except for like the first 2 months, I think I got involved like in that show for a while. So it had this big cult hit in Chicago. Like people would line up like down the block in freezing cold weather, and we would sometimes do 3 shows in one night. So I was getting this like crazy, great, affirmation from working at the Annoyance. And when I first got Second City, I was it was a little bit of a, like you really start at the bottom. And there's so many great people there. And touring is very odd because if you don't know how to play a certain game, like you learn in Buffalo, you learn how to, do that one improv game. Give me a line in Buffalo. So you start off in Chicago at the main theater, and then you have the option of touring. No, you have to tour, but I think the Monday, there's like I can't remember the structure, but there's like, I think it's like one Monday a month your company gets to do the show at Second City. Yeah. But it's a Monday, so it's kind of like like an off school night. So the people that come know that they're not seeing the main stage show. It's like another thing, yeah. So, yeah, and then there are several touring companies. Then there are several resident companies, and then the main stage is like that's the big prize. But I actually I toured for about a year, and I took a leave of absence because of the Brady Bunch. I also was doing another show with Jill Soloway at the Annoyance called the Miss Vagina Pageant.
Oh, Jill Soloway from Transparent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these were her babies, and so she was like starting out. She had so much, just so much energy and so much imagination, and I feel like people really noticed what she was doing, even though we were just in this like kind of seedy ex-drag club. The Annoyance took over this ex-drag theater, which was so crazy with folding chairs and. remember we did this show called the Miss Vagina Pageant, and Lorne Michaels came to see us. We had to do a special show for him, and he brought his good buddy, Quincy Jones. And they were sitting on these shitty chairs. It was so crazy. And I had lunch with Lorne Michaels, and it was under consideration for SNL.
Really?
Yeah, and but also, like, what's weird about the Miss Vagina Pageant, it was a kind of a feminist comedy about, you know, it was actually like a pageant, you know, it was literally a pageant.
It was like a mock pageant
Yes.
on stage.
So what ended up happening was that 4 out of the 6 of us were under consideration for SNL, and that was like the one year that they didn't look at Second City. So even though I was working at both places, it was weird that it was kind of unprecedented that was the one time.
I mean, almost every cast member, I mean, like a majority have been Second
Yes,
City.
absolutely. So it was a very strange year in 1991, and I just remember feeling like all of a sudden it felt like a real pageant because we were vying for this like spot. It was so weird. Like, it's weird to compete against your friends. I mean, not that you ever do, because everybody has their own, but it's just a weird. And actually, I think Lauren has some history of sort of kind of subtly pitting people against each other. So, like, 2 of us had lunch with him at the same time. One of us would walk with him one way, walk with his,
wow.
you know,
it's like
his
psychological mind games.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, and it was very, you know, at the time it was like it was head spinning, and I didn't get it, and I was disappointed, but I was really disappointed, but I felt like I didn't have the space to be disappointed because I had to be happy for my friends. It's so weird, you know. So it was kind of a weird dance, and I feel like it took me a few years and a lot of therapy later to kind of go, well, you know, the good news is that it's an affirmation of your talent. So if you look at it, like, I mean, there's so many people who have been considered for SNL who have not.
Yeah, Jim Carrey, I think.
Yes, Stephen Colbert. You know, there's so many people. I mean, I'm only naming one, but you know, there's I think there's like a long list on the SNL 40th that they kind of show some of their audition tapes, which is kind of hilarious. So there is like that affirmation. I mean, and there's some people that, you know, go away and never come back. And I remember I was probably, it must have been like 10 years later, I was waiting tables in Beverly Hills, and Mike Shoemaker, who was Lauren's right-hand man, who was with us at lunch and on the walk, he was having dinner with Tina Fey, and he came up to me, he's like, hey, Kate, hey. And I was waiting tables, and I was so in like the funk, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, and I'd so like let it go. He's like, from SNL. I mean, I knew who Tina Fey was at the time. She wasn't super famous at the time, but he's like, he said to me, he goes, I hope you're not giving up. Don't give up. And I was like, no, I'm doing my comedy act. And, you know, it was like such a weird, I felt like he was snapping me out of a haze. And so it's so funny. I've seen Mike since I got The Office, and like I've seen him at so many NBC functions, and he's just always been this like kind of bright light, like that sort of reminds you not to, you know, just not to give up on yourself, but also not to take the losses too seriously. They're just part of the deal. You know, I think that's an important piece, that sometimes it can crush you if you know. I mean, and I say that now because since The Office is over, like, I have disappointments. I get close to stuff, and I'm like, you know, I have this kind of vision of where I think my career is going to go, and sometimes it's that's not
kind of the
plan.
nature of the business. In a
It
way.
is.
No matter how high you get
That's
or what
true.
level you are.
That's true. And I think I had imagined that I would get to a point where I would be immune to that.
Or you kind of coast in a way.
Yeah. Or just wouldn't take it so deep sometimes. But it's like, I'm an artist, so it's like, you know, and I'm an actor, and like, unfortunately, in business, I'm a business person too, but it's like my business is me, so it's weird. So I mean, I don't know.
Did you find other people in Second City that sort of took losses like that harder? And
I think so. You know, it's funny. I was at the 50th anniversary a few years ago, and I remember feeling like there was a few people there that I was like, oh my God, I totally thought some of these people would be way more famous. And they, like, some of them kind of never worked again, or never got out of Chicago, I should say. And they're super talented. So you kind of feel like, what's the misstep, or what's the, you know, I don't even know if it's a misstep. I feel like some people are just wired to move on, and some people aren't.
Yeah.
You know, it's really a strange thing. That's why I always tell, like, anybody who's pursuing improv and comedy and acting of any kind, like, just make sure you're taking care of yourself, like, just either with therapy or something that like supports your soul or something, or like, you know, whatever you want to call it, but it's like, make sure you take care of yourself, because there's so many hits that can just bring you down. And it can be so confusing. It's just
it's almost it's like a combination between like talent and like developing kind of like a core strength to kind of move through different levels.
Right. And it's funny because the people that I've met that have like really long careers, like you think that they've just been on top the whole time, and then you realize, oh no, but certain things like support you through other processes, and it's really like a fascinating, wonderful, horrible thing. 'Cause sometimes like the highs can be so high, the lows can be so weird because they're not like when you're a kid low. They're not when you're struggling.
Yeah.
It's not the same. But
it's like a different type of low, like missing out on like a certain project as opposed to sort of not getting an audition at the very beginning.
Absolutely. And then you hear that, I've heard things that like even Harrison Ford, even Han Solo feels like, well, this was my last gig. This was it. Like there's that feeling of like this perpetual thing that it'll never be as good as.
No, I've heard Dustin Hoffman say that too. Like every movie he appears in, he thinks it's like the last one. Nobody's ever going to offer him anything else.
Now I understand. I used to feel like, what the hell's wrong with you? But now I'm like, oh, it's wrong with all of us. It's just so built in because it's so hard sometimes to especially because I feel like I had to kind of relearn how to, after being on a show for 9 years, felt like I really had to relearn how to show up and really work on an audition and kind of figure out like, okay, how am I my best self,
Yeah. Were there any skills from Second City that you think helped with either auditioning or even just like acting in any project?
Well, I think the skill of improv and having like the use of, because I also studied with Del Close, who had his own theater improv Olympic at the time.
Very famous.
Very famous, yeah. And Del did not like women. And I do remember,
overtly or?
Yeah, it was pretty overt. Yeah, he didn't hide it. So there weren't that many women in our class because of that, because it was like, and I remember having a couple of tough classes and like feeling like, I holding back the tears. I never cried in front of him, but I was like, holy shit! Like, and I get it. Like, it's a very specific thing that he's teaching, and I feel like sometimes, you just don't want to be the woman that's in the cast that's like, because you're only there because it's affirmative action. They had to have a woman. You want to be a player.
Yeah.
But I also think that the great thing about improv is just like understanding that, because I feel like so many times, particularly in like comedy movies, I've done a bunch of indie movies in the last 4 years, and I feel like they're sort of hungry for something that you have to bring. So you can do a few takes that are as written, but if you can improvise within the structure that they've created, because I also think that it's great to be able to improvise a whole entire scene, but it's not always useful for when you're filming, and sometimes you waste a lot of time.
Yeah, and especially when there's like a story arc for each scene.
Exactly, and I really learned how to improv for the camera working on The Office. I mean, that was like the best teacher, and it took a little while to figure it out, but it's sort of like you don't speak when you're not really spoken to, or you don't speak too much when you're spoken to. It's like, and sometimes you can improvise, like if your line is a word, like then you have one word to improvise, like because there's a rhythm to the scene and you don't want to mess it up, but you can heighten it. So I feel like that's a tremendous gift to just kind of realize that each take is an opportunity. You do want to do the writer service, you do want to do the director service, but you also can possibly give them a gift that they weren't expecting, or like that they that's kind of much appreciated.
Now, working so many years on stage, and then when you finally acted for the first time in front of a camera with sound equipment, was that a big adjustment for you?
Huge. I will say, thank God for Greg Daniels, our showrunner in The Office. He was so patient with me, because he'd say, a little less. And like some directors were like, down to 10%. Charles McDougall was like, bring it down to 10%. This British guy was like hilarious. But I got it. It's like the less is more, and kind of really understanding that the way that you communicate with the camera is so different, and also understanding where you are on the lens. Like if you are way in the back, you may have to stand up or do something that's a little different than you would if the camera's really close to you. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but it's weird, because when you're so used to doing a scene, you feel like, well, if I'm speaking, then I'm heard. Yeah. But if it's there's so many subtle things that
the camera's almost like a magnifying lens in a way.
Absolutely.
It kind of really zoom in on you. You can read your thoughts in a way that you never really thought before.
Which is why so many of my lines got cut from The Office, because they knew what I was thinking. That was actually like a true thing. They were like, we don't need the line.
But that was really such like a part of the tone and the nuance of The Office.
Yeah, I'm so honored to be a part of that show. Because I feel like it totally changed television. There's so many shows that reflect what we were doing, and that it never existed before, and that to some people it seems so odd and so like, what's this? You know?
As you mentioned before, like the SNL Second City, that was in the early 1990s, and The Office was early 2000s.
Yeah.
What was sort of the trajectory to getting to that Office audition?
Oh God, it was so many mistakes. Oh my God. Yeah. I toured with the Really Brady Bunch for like a whole year, because we were like on this crazy, like there was actually like the second half of the year we were on a bus and truck tour, so we were literally on the Allman Brothers old rock and roll bus.
And that was affiliated with Second City.
It wasn't. No, it was Jill Solomon. It was
okay.
The Annoyance. Yeah. But I remember Anna Gasteyer was on that bus from SNL. So there's a few people that were like, and the guy from K-Rock, Ralph Garman. There's a few of us, and but it was that was like a very interesting, like I never thought I would do a tour for a year. I think I only signed up for the first half, and then like somebody dropped out the second, so I ended up doing the second. But that was like, I'm glad I was in my 20s. I can't imagine doing it now. But although I have been touring with Jane Lynch, and we've hit a lot of the same places, which is so weird because we played the Kennedy Center then, and I just played the Kennedy Center with her.
Oh wow, that's incredible. Play the Kennedy Center.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy. So yeah. I mean, it was a really good tour back then. But then I had. Then I met somebody on the road, a guy that I moved in with way too fast and shared way too much of my credit with, and lived in New York for a little while, and moved to LA with him because I went to do the play Valley of the Dolls, which was with some of the Brady Bunch people. It was Tom Booker's Theater Go-Go, and it was a very cult. I mean, I call it like pre-YouTube theater. It was similar to the Brady Bunch where we were just doing a movie on stage, but it had a very cult following.
Yeah.
So there was it was very Rocky Horror, and this was like, 96, 97 in and 95 it started. It was the gay culture. It was like very. It was just a different time. Yeah. Like, yeah.
Well, Valley of the Dolls, similar to Rocky Horror, has that kind of campy vibe.
Totally. Where you just have to do what's like. I sometimes felt like I was conducting the audience because they would just say certain lines with me. I was the Patty Duke part, the Neely O'Hara. So during that time, like I remember when I moved to LA to start the show, and then the show ended up going off Broadway. So when I was back in New York, then I broke up with the guy. We broke up. It was a mess. I was like sleeping on couches for a while. I went through some really serious financial crap because of it. That I had just naively. It's like, how do you divorce someone you weren't married to?
Yeah.
You got to go bankrupt. I don't recommend that for many people, but it was a really huge lesson for me, and I really felt like I had to just kind of figure out my place. And when Valley of the Dolls ended in 97, like I started singing in a band with John Flansburgh and then They Might Be Giants. He had another band called Monopuff.
Yeah.
We used to open for the Giants, and we had our own little tour going on, but we were mostly playing like the Lower East Side, and it was, really great fun. I felt like in some ways I couldn't get arrested because I felt like Valley of the Dolls was a critical hit, and I did have some attention. Like I had this interview in Interview Magazine for Ones to Watch, and I realized like it was 8 years later that The Office happened. So it's just like, oh my God, which it doesn't. It was a really long 8 years though,
yeah.
And I eventually got back to LA in like 2000, and then just was doing my comedy act, The Lampshades, and waiting tables in Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
Like,
The Lampshades, which you're doing now currently
yes,
as well.
I kind of never stopped. It's like this thing that's it's this like it's actually like a two-person dying lounge act, and we've actually become the thing we're making fun of. It's like we are like there's kind of no difference between our characters. It's like
we're kind of
we're trapped in an act. We're trapped doing this act, and so it's like the act continues. It's really interesting.
You've always had that love for theater, so that's always been there.
For doing live stuff, yeah. Absolutely. And 3 years ago, Jane Lynch asked me to kind of be her sidekick in a live performance that she was doing in New York for a few days, and it was such a blast. We had such a great time, and it hasn't really stopped. We've been touring for the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, with a 5-piece band. And it's just kind of this crazy.
Is that where the Christmas album?
Yes, that's why we did the Christmas album. Yeah. So yeah, it's been this really fun place to kind of really shine in a weird. I mean, we're playing like these performing arts centers and these giant symphony halls, and we're playing Joe's Pub in New York and the Kennedy Center and all this great stuff. And it's like, it's this thing where, like, for me, I'm so pleased because I didn't know if I still had the muscles to do that.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, oh my God, I'm so wired for that. But you won't catch me in, like, a Les Mis tour. I can't kill myself. But I understand, like, there's a certain niche, like, there's a certain thing that I really fall into. And what I love about working with Jane is that she's so generous letting me kind of mess with her. I mean, she's sort of the taskmaster, and I'm like the sheepdog that kind of comes in and messes everything up. And sometimes I'm doing things behind her and she doesn't even know what I'm doing, but she knows that I'm supporting, you know, it's like we're these weird heightened versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's been really an interesting opportunity, you know, and really just a gift. So
but going back to The Office, so how did you, so at that time I think the English show was very, very big with Ricky Gervais.
Yes.
So how did you hear about the audition, or were you sort of recommended for it, or how did it?
You know what? It was just like a regular call. I remember I couldn't go. I remember I auditioned for the pilot, and I couldn't go initially. I couldn't. No, I could go initially, and then I didn't get. I auditioned for Jan first. Didn't get Jan. Clearly, they went another way. Lauren was awesome, but and then I went back for another part a few months later, and I remember like I was out of town and I couldn't make it, and then they didn't find the person right away, so I got to
Had they reshot the pilot, or were they?
No, I just wasn't in the pilot.
Okay.
That's showbiz, baby. That's all right. But I remember when I first got it, I didn't know if I would continue every week. I wasn't sure if I was going to do, because we just did 6 episodes for the first year, because we were technically just guest stars, and I was like, I'm not sure, you know. Yeah. But I was still waiting tables, and I kept my job because I didn't know if we were going to continue. So I would cover my shifts during the week, and I would still work my Sunday brunch. Right. And I just remember they asked us to improvise at our tables, at our desks, I mean. So they wanted us to be there all day. So they asked us to bring real paperwork so that we could actually just be doing busy work. It wasn't really about like creating scenes. It was more about like creating your own world at your...
Developing that whole environment that we...
Yep. Yeah,
got used to seeing every week.
Absolutely, and our computers didn't work. Only a few of them worked in the first season. So we really I remember just doing this crazy staple project, and I was doing like some of my tax work. I read like Ruth Gordon's book, this thick ass book. It was fantastic. But I loved that it really created an ensemble vibe. So you know, I feel like it was them figuring out how to shoot us like we're, you know, deer in the wild or giraffes you know, I mean, it's crazy. Like they really kind of treated us like we were animals in the wild.
It was a very unique style. You see it, you know, being copied so much now in almost every show, but seeing it at that time, that was like the first of that.
Well, our DP and our first camera, they had worked on Survivor.
Really?
literally were the perfect, like, who would think that would make sense for us? But it totally did. It's like they were, you know, they were swinging, we weren't swinging. You know, they were kind of catching.
They were chasing after everybody.
Yep.
So did you guys have kind of the freedom to move about the set any way you wanted?
Not any way. You just didn't want to interfere with the scene, like with what needed, the story that needed to be told in each scene. Yeah. But there were certainly moments that you could kind of, you know, sort of physically figure out like what your opinion was. You know what I mean? What your character's reality was for whatever was happening, which is like amazing.
Was it clear, like the tone that would be developed, because it's very like super hyper realistic?
Absolutely. It's funny because my boyfriend, who's an NBC photographer, he shot their first gallery, and Greg was like, "No one look at the camera." No, like he did not want it to look like a TV show at all. But I feel like I feel like I love how protective of what we were doing he was. Like he was so protective of the process. Yeah. And I feel like so many times you work on TV and there's so many other cooks that you don't really get a sense of like who's whatever. Some stuff, just artistic stuff.
But here was really like his vision, and he was implanting that in.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm so grateful to him because I feel like he taught me how to be. You know, I mean, it's like I don't even know how he knew that I could do what I got to do, and all of us like. But he really trusted us, and he really knew how to communicate, and Steve was such a huge part too, because Steve was, I mean, talk about like we were literally on his coattails. I mean, the first season, he had most of the talking for most of the show anyway, but I feel like the time between first season and second season, 40-Year-Old Virgin came out, or no, it was about to come out during the beginning of the second season,
Yeah.
and I feel like that was what that changed the show. It changed everyone's interest. I mean, it changed the character, because I feel like he really fought for Michael to have more heart than, say, David Brent.
Yeah.
You know, and he was so much more relatable, and I think the writers trusted him because he also...
And he wanted like everybody like inherently like him. I think that was really key to
Yep.
the Michael Scott character.
Absolutely. And I think David Brent might have, but also had like a weird defense thing that Michael Scott didn't have. Michael Scott was much more vulnerable, and I feel like that's why people could plug in, and he did have some very few victories, but very small victories, but we were so like surprised by how we felt about those as an audience.
It seemed like over time in every season, you know, all the characters like you and Craig Robinson and you know, Rainn Wilson, everybody sort of was able to kind of pop out and have their moments. Do you feel that was coming along in a way?
Yeah, it was weird, because in some ways I was like, because I had a bunch of storylines cut in season 2, and some of it had nothing to do with me, because it was like, you know, I remember the Halloween episode was the first time they were supposed to reveal that I was an alcoholic, and it completely got cut because they wanted Michael to be handing out candy at the end. Like, they had this whole thing, and my storyline was so dark. I was like a witch with like blown out brains. You can barely see me. They barely show me. I literally like swiped the screen when the final cut. But Paul Feig was the director, and we went through this whole thing. And I remember feeling like, oh my God, am I going to get fired? Like, I didn't know what. I was like, I didn't understand that, like, they were just going to cook all this information. It was just going to come out in this, like, beautiful stew.
Yeah.
And also the fact that, like, my character was not like the accountants. It wasn't like Angela or Kevin and Oscar. Like, or Phyllis and Stanley. Like, sometimes I wouldn't talk for some episodes at all. But I feel like they found this, like, power in the less is more thing for me. And I really grew to trust it.
Yeah, you see the little hints of the alcoholism coming out, and
yeah, and like,
really
yeah, absolutely. By the time the
surface.
Christmas episode came out, then it was like, okay, all bets are off, and then like, and guess what? You're taking your top off. I'm like, what? So, but I just by that point, like, there'd been such a sense of trust and feeling like, okay, well, then I don't want to talk too much, because I do feel like sometimes if characters have a lot of exposition, we sort of don't listen to them as much, or we don't enjoy, you know, I don't know. I mean, what I get from the fans now is that, like, there should have been more Meredith. I'm like, you know what? Less is more. And I feel like I don't know if it would have done the same. The chess match would have been different. You know, I don't know if I would have won my victories, you know.
Yeah, because I think the tone of the show is all about kind of like what's going on in these people's heads. How are they reacting to all these crazy scenarios that Michael's putting forward?
Absolutely. But I feel like, you know, season 3, I feel like I sort of went under. Meredith went under, and then season 4 was the first episode was when I got hit by the car, and I was like, we're off and running, man. So it was almost like the holdback really helped, because it felt like literally it came out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, that episode in particular, when you get hit by the car, I mean, that's when you really popped on there.
Yeah. And you know, just the idea of Michael feeling like he wants to help, but, you know, and then that kind of got set up for, like, you know, trying to get me sober, Meredith sober for, you know, Moroccan Christmas and stuff like that, where we're, again, another Paul Feig episode, you know, crazy.
Yeah,
But,
Paul Feig, Harold Ramis, I think Jason Reitman
Yep,
directed.
Yep. Oh my God, we had so many great people. Yeah.
Was everybody sort of, all the directors that came on, were they very clear about, okay, this is how the show is to be shot, or did they have any leeway
I
in
think
how they
they
wanted to?
understood what was already set up. They understood the reverence of what. I don't think they were going to change too much. They weren't going to reinvent our wheel, but they were just going to make it ride like just smooth and wonderful. Like, they just had this. I just loved Harold Ramis. I felt like nothing was too small for him to notice or to care about. Just a really great, yeah.
What did you pick up from watching him work?
I just like, sometimes he would fight for these little moments that like seem like, why would you, you know, like, because our writers were very much hands-on producers, and sometimes they would, you know, try to direct the director, and I was like, oh no, he's the greatest. No. But, you know, I get it. Like, that was their right, and that's, you know, because we were in new territory, so they were allowed to. I mean, they should have been allowed to do that. That's their thing. But I just feel like with certain directors, like, I'm like, oh no, you don't understand. You have the greatest surgeon in the world. Like, just let him do his thing, you know.
I always wondered about the Office set. So was that built On a soundstage, or
It
was
was
that
on a
actually part
soundstage,
of...
but it did have 4 walls and a ceiling.
Ah,
And the ceiling, sometimes they would pop stuff out of the drop ceiling to put extra lights in. But as you can tell, I looked so good on the show. They didn't use very much. The lighting was very specific.
yeah.
Which was great. So but yeah, and it actually made it for a very efficient workplace because there weren't a lot of setups. If you had a lighting setup, it would be like maybe 10 minutes, as opposed to other TV shows where it's like it could be 45 minutes or an hour.
Yeah, because they wanted that kind of flat fluorescent light look.
Right.
So it wasn't really about adding like a lot of key
Right.
lights in there.
Absolutely. And we weren't like doing a lot of coverage, as they say, like we didn't have to get closer. It's like because they had the zoom in ability and the way that it was shot, they kind of had like a really great thing going on. So we could get a lot done in a pretty short period of time. And Steve is just an amazing actor. He could give 10 choices. He'd do the same thing but 10 different ways, and one was funnier than the next. And he really is. He's a genius.
Yeah, that was really the first. He was on the Daily Show before
Right.
that, but that was really the
Right.
first project that really put him on the map.
Yeah, he had done a bunch of pilots because I know my boyfriend, who was an NBC photographer, was sort of like, "Uh-oh, it's Steve. I guess the pilot's not going to make it," because he had done so many. But luckily, this was the thing he was waiting for. He had done Anchorman too, but again, that was kind of a small part,
Yeah.
or just a supporting part, I should
Yeah,
say.
he's kind of one of those actors where almost like Dustin Hoffman at the beginning, like you never think like that's like a leading man.
Totally.
But he is 100%. Like you get behind him as an audience.
Absolutely, and I feel like he really championed the heart of the show, and and I feel like as a girl, like I always loved the Jim and Pam, the Unrequited. I was so invested in rooting for them. We would just do table reads, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I was as excited as the fans.
What were some moments that you feel like you were really able to kind of contribute the most to the show in a way?
There's so many. I'm just kidding. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I think. I don't know. I think I was just really lucky to get to play with the big leagues. Like I don't feel like. I mean, I feel like my contribution was also the writers. It was really Greg Daniels who decided that Meredith was worth these moments, and that we were going to just play this little game through the whole thing. Yeah. So I'm just really grateful. I did do more physical comedy than anybody on the show, but I
obviously being hit by the car the first.
Yes.
Did you do that stunt? I mean, were you?
I did. I did. I had to. There was a big mat, but I had to it wasn't that bad. But I did get a little bruised up because we had shot part of it before where I was wearing this short sleeve blouse. I'm like, God damn it. So. But yeah, I just had to hit the glass and roll off. It wasn't too bad, but I was just, it was just about a matter of like getting exactly what they wanted. But there's like the parkour episode where I was like bouncing. I was planking, so I was planking on the top of the stall, and Dwight comes in and blasts Meredith with the fire extinguisher, so I had like a fall. But I got hit in the face with a football. I actually did that stunt for a little bit because I thought it was going to be funnier, and then when I saw it, I was like, I could have been anybody with a wig on.
They shot that from the distance.
Right, just sort of. I was like, that wasn't what I thought was happening. Okay. But anyway, but yeah, and then there was, oh my God, and then we actually worked with a real bat. Joss Whedon was our director for the.
Oh, that was a real bat. I kept thinking that was like a CGI.
It was a couple. It was a real bat, a CGI bat, and then they actually had a puppet. So there was some guy under my large denim skirt with like the stick literally up my ass, who like went there, and I was like, "Hey, can I get your name? Can we just say hi before you put your hand up my ass?"
I'm trying to remember the net with the bat. Didn't that go over your head?
It was a plastic bag.
Oh, plastic bag.
Yeah, that went over my. And there was like an electric thing, or I mean a motorized thing with like where the bat had. It was like literally on my head, and it was like.
And the bat was literally inside there.
There was no.
Oh,
that was the electronic.
Oh, that was the electronic bat. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
The motorized. Yeah, no. I know. And then the guy was like sort of controlling it. I'm like, whatever. It was very. It was, yeah. Did
you do a lot of physical comedy in Second City?
Not as much, no. But I certainly had it the annoyance, and it's certainly something I love. And I feel like that's the gift of like kind of figuring out who does what, letting people do their thing, and I mean, it was always like a good challenge.
How do you think the dynamic of the show changed after Steve Carell had left? Was it?
I think we were. It was. I felt like the Florida thing was a lot to accept at first. I was nervous about it, but everybody's such a strong actor, and having like Kathy Bates was like so surreal. I mean, she's amazing, and but I do feel like there was a little. We were swimming for a while, and then we were floating again.
Yeah.
And I didn't like too much when Jim and Pam were kind of really at odds. I was like, oh no, But I understood what that's part of. There has to be ebbs and flows.
Yeah, and create that conflict so they can get back together. But everybody was rooting for them so much those early seasons.
Right. So you just don't want to, just kill the baby. It's like keep the baby alive somehow, some life support. I don't know. But I did think it was great to have Ellie Kemper and Ed Helms, and they definitely stepped up in a great way, and then we started to have like more guest stars, and I mean, right before Steve left, when we had like Idris Elba, I mean, there's so many.
James Spader.
James Spader. Oh my God, James Spader. I was so scared to death of.
Why?
One time, it was a Christmas episode, and I did one scene, and my character was, Meredith, kind of like supposed to come on to him, and I grabbed his ass, and they're like, cut! I mean, we finished the scene, and I was like, oh my God, he's going to kill me, He was actually very nice about it. He was nicer about it than I expected. But part of me was like, holy shit, you don't just grab Jade. I mean, just because every time I saw him, his entire resume would go through my head. I mean,
yeah, he hadn't done too many like he did Pretty in Pink, I think, at the beginning, but aside from that, it was always like much heavier roles.
Pretty dark. Yeah. No, and that's what I mean. Like, he brought all that gravitas. I mean, holy crap. I did love working with Will Ferrell, because he's just up for anything. He's the greatest. Yeah. And I love that my Meredith Walk of Shame was with Steve and Will, like Diego and Michael Scott were at Meredith's post-Katrina house. Shithole. They actually shot at like guerrilla style at somebody's house that was like a hoarder. I swear to God. I don't know how quickly they found this house, but it was so like.
You think they wouldn't just try to set dress something and make it?
I know, and I'm surprised we didn't shoot more in it, because it was fascinating. Every time we would walk in the house, we'd be like, ah! Nicotine stain, and like the kitchen had like pizza boxes like taller than Will Ferrell. I was like, what the hell is happening? So just like great, and also just a sense of really being in the right place all the time.
Yeah.
And having a desk and a computer, like having a place to be as an actor, like having a place to sit is like, it sounds so lazy, but it's like sometimes there's this feeling like of awkwardness, or where and also feels like sometimes people are using like their power, like it's a little power play, like, well, I'm going to be here while waiting, as opposed to just like everyone having a place to be.
Yeah.
When we got to the set, like, what a gift. I mean, just like all those things that I don't know if I'll ever have on a set again.
I mean, that is very unique, because on most shows it's sort of like, here's this space and where you're going to be. Where here it's like, this is your desk and this is your office, and Yeah, and I actually got to keep shit in my desk. I mean, I had like fake booze and stuff too, but I sometimes would write, like I could do other stuff sometimes, multitask, crazy. What did it feel like finally coming to the end of the show, filming that final episode?
It was really endless and sad. And I'll tell you, I remember right before we shot the last scene, we all met in John Krasinski's trailer. And I think we all had a toast. And we went in, and then I felt like Greg Daniels just kept doing another version and another version. We were all 2 hours late for our own wrap party. He didn't want it to end. It was crazy. Yeah. People were like, I'm like, I didn't even like look at my phone until it was over. And it was just like, it was just, I don't know. I just felt like there was a sense of really honoring what we did, but not in a weird, lame, pat yourself on the back. It was just like, you know what, so much got accomplished during this time.
And it's so rare for a show to go on that many seasons and have that type of following.
Yeah, and not have it be like by the end where people aren't even talking to each other. Like that was never the case.
So it really felt like a family among the cast and the writers and everybody.
Yeah, it's really true. Yeah, and I think that it's this thing that I, through like, auditioning now and kind of feeling like sometimes I don't know which way I'm going to get treated. Like sometimes I feel like there's someone that loves The Office who has, a reverence for, or they're like a fan of mine. And sometimes it's like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's like, okay, they don't know who I am. It's like, get them in, get them out. I never know what I'm going to get, like in some of these circumstances, but I feel like I get to hold the fact that I had this experience, and it doesn't matter what other people think. It really doesn't. It's like there was something that was lived and breathed, and no matter what happens, I feel like I'll always be proud of it. I don't think I'll turn on Netflix in 5 years and be like, ugh, well, that's dated,
Yeah, no, to have something like be part of pop culture, that and really make that stamp.
Right, and not in a way that feels like, because I feel like there's other things that were in fashion, like in pop culture when we were doing it, and I feel like they just kind of went away. So it's weird that we've sort of had this weird, steady underground thing.
Well, especially I think a lot of the jokes aren't like of that moment only.
Right.
So you can watch it now and say,
right.
that just has significant universal reverence to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that also, there's the kind of the zen of, working with people who are at the top of their game, and that whatever they're creating is like, it's we will never be here again. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, this is it's crazy. It's really crazy. I just remember one time when we were doing Office Olympics, there was one take where we had this like fake closing ceremonies with all the paper birds and stuff, and the yogurt lids for medals. And Steve Carell, he decided to cry during one of the episodes during one of the takes because the Olympics made him cry. The music to the Olympics. And I was like, it was unbelievable. Like he really brought his heart and soul. So I think that when someone does that, it's like you're only as I feel like no one can really fail unless you're really not paying attention.
No, I feel like he always put his entire effort into it every single time.
Always.
Like he felt that dedication to it. He was never phoning it in.
Never.
Ever.
Never.
Like he was really putting himself out there.
Yeah.
He was not afraid of being embarrassed or anything.
Right. You could feel his pain, and not in like a it was more like a oh god, like that really good juicy pain that's awkward and loaded.
Yeah. I was gonna say after The Office, I mean, how did you feel like as an artist? Like, were there things that you really wanted to develop from that point on, or because working with Jane Lynch has really been a big foundation for you too? And
absolutely, I think I kind of suffer from I feel like I'm working through it, but I feel like I suffer from the actor-writer thing where it's like, I'm an actor, I have a great idea, and I feel like 9 times out of 10 that's not true. It's usually not that great that an actor has this like self-congratulatory idea. So I feel like I'm a little too hard on myself. I have been developing a few ideas, but it's going very slow. Unfortunately, I'm dealing with some critics in my head that I need to get rid of. But I will say that I think that it's just having worked with great writing, like you understand. I think that's why that's like the bar so high in my head. That's part of it too. But I think that just kind of understanding that like no matter what I do from this point on, I can give my best, and I think that's something I learned from Steve. It's like it doesn't matter how many lines you have or how little you have to do on paper. You bring your whole self to every project, and even if it's like you're the person that doesn't like cause any trouble, who's pleasant to be around, like you get points for that.
So it's like a team effort to make a movie, to make a TV show, to make anything.
And I do think that there is unfortunately like a lot of actors, my boyfriend says like if you can't be good, be loud. Like sometimes people kind of throw their ego around because they're insecure, and I'm insecure, but I don't do that. I feel like but I'll tell you like whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't think it really, I think it actually takes away from the project. I think the thing I learned from Steve and Greg Daniels is like the project is the most important thing, or don't do it.
Yeah, it's like serve the scene, serve the movie, serve
and that's
the
a
TV
second
show.
city thing too, improv thing, and it's like if you're not serving the people around you, and sometimes serving them means you need to step up and just do something crazy or do something bigger because they're not doing it. But when you're working with people who are very competent, you have to really figure out like what are you giving, not just like
Yeah.
what are you saying? It's like, what are you giving? Are you giving something that could possibly be taken further, and it's okay if it's not, doesn't mean whatever.
Well, do you have any upcoming dates for your stage show, or Lampshades, or even with
Yeah,
Jane Lynch?
actually, I'm doing a Lampshade show tomorrow night, and in Burbank we sometimes play Flappers, and then we're doing a show April 18th with Bobcat Goldthwait.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. He does a show at the Hollywood Improv called the Crab Apples. It's just like a crazy name because he's been doing this for so long. So sometimes we're kind of a little bit in the stand-up world. And then Jane and I are doing a bunch of benefits this month. So I think that's kind of the only thing that's on the menu right now that I can talk about. Wow. I also have a show that I've been working on all year that I've voiced on a new show that's they just announced it, but I'm not sure when it's coming out. But it's called OKKO.
It's an animated show. It's
an animated show. Yeah, Cartoon Network. It's Ian Jones Quarter. He's one of the writers from Adventure Time. He created this new show. It's called OKKO, Let's Be Heroes. And I play KO's mom. So that's been really, really fun. It's been kind of a fun thing. And I have a recurring character on Steven Universe. I play Barb, the post person who's...
and you were on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, I was just a guest star in that. Yeah, I played Mead Marge. And then I had a little recurring thing this year with American Housewife on ABC. I played Crossing Guard Sandy, who was like Katie Mixon's mortal enemy on the show. And I just did another period. Season 3, Annie Sullivan comes back with Helen Keller. We were in the pilot and we just came back. Wow. We came back for the Olympics of 1906. Hilarious.
Is it interesting to step into these shows and see sort of casts that are developed and the chemistry and kind of peering into that a little bit? Absolutely.
And what was so fun about being on another period is that the lead camera was on The Office, Sarah. It just kind of a great, there's crew people that you see again where you're just like, oh my God, or directors. It's kind of awesome. Like there's some overlap. Brooklyn Nine-Nine had a lot of crew people from The Office too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Similar style.
Similar, absolutely. But yeah, it is fun. Like I did like the second episode of New Girl this season, and I was like, season 6, man, second episode, like, so, I understand like where they are, and they're just in their process, because they're like, how long is this going to go? Are we going to keep getting to do this? Because they're a very close group over there. Yeah. You definitely feel like they have a family vibe, and like they're kind of really grateful they'll get to do what they do. Not always true on every show, so it's kind of great when you see it, So yeah, it has been interesting, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and it's never a dull moment.
I guess just to wrap it up, what would you say is maybe the biggest takeaway from, I guess, your whole journey? If you could.
I will say that I love being a late bloomer. I love that the biggest job I got was at 40, because I feel like I probably would have fucked it up at 20, and if I didn't fuck it up, I still feel like my perspective would not be as
to appreciate it, or
well, I think the level of gratitude and the level of reality is so appreciated, and I do kind of feel like I have been invited to like a great party, and if I continue to show up to the party, there's a place for me, and it's really up to me to remember that. Because it's easy sometimes to kind of misinterpret signs. And I just feel like anybody that is really following their dreams, I mean, don't worry if you're waiting tables, if you're doing something else, it's not personal. It's just part of your process. And and why not you? So yeah, I'm still eternally grateful, and I feel like I still continue to find these great sweet spots, and even though I sometimes hold myself a little I'm comparing myself to other people, which I shouldn't, because it's really like when I'm really feeling right in the world, like I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and that's a great feeling. And I do feel that more often than most people, I think. Not all the time, and not during pilot season, but that's okay. But I also just remembering that like. That I don't have to worry about like, I'll never have something that going to get, that might be true, but I don't have to suffer over that either. And it's like, there's so many gifts that I've been given because of The Office. I mean, that was it probably will be the greatest show I ever worked on. I can't imagine topping that experience on so many levels, and that's okay. You know, as an aging female in Hollywood, you know, good for me, man. I didn't get a lot of makeup, and so there. You know, I think it's a great thing. I feel like I kind of like fooled them all.
Yeah. I think you were excellent.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
But you know what I'm saying.
I know.
It's like there's a weird, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it is a great feeling, and I just thank you for having me. I mean, we probably wouldn't be talking if it wasn't for The Office. So that's kind of cool.
Well, appreciate you taking the time to record today.
Thank you. I
Thank you
appreciate
so much. Very nice to meet
you.
you.
I didn't ask you anything. Oh my God, I'm horrible.